keep me, oh keep me safe. Stuck within this maze encompassing my brain. She walks up to the mountain, looks up towards the clouds. Can't see the pinnacle but can hear the monsters growl. I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me, at least that's what I like to think when I start to freak. Shaking on the sofa, bleeding from the soda, dreaming lacrimosa, demons of the soul start to peel back the layers, break where it tapers, palm feels these craters of these thieves and traders. I like to say I'm tired, but I really mean I'm weak. Eyes closed, lying motionless, but the voices, they never sleep. I've learned to live without them, but the pills ran dry. They come back with a vengeance. Will I escape this time? Shaking on the sofa, bleeding from the soda, dreaming lacrimosa, demons of the soul start to peel back the layers, break where it tapers, palm feels the craters of these thieves and traders. I don't even know if I'm alive and cry. I've been stuck dissociated every night. I've been fucking sick of every song I write. I've been on the verge of tears like all the time. So keep me, oh keep me safe. Stuck within this maze encompassing my brain.
Just let it rain, give me another reason to complain. These clouds never cease to find me, but that's okay because the sunlight's blinding.
So what do you think of this song? Nice weather we're having, as long as you like downpours.
You say see the werewolf in my eyes, and it's a full moon tonight. Well, I haven't changed it. Sometimes got a brand new perspective.
And I find granules in my trainers, stuck between my toes.
I keep starting fires and I keep punching walls, but I love my friends. They make me feel alive again. Keep me, oh keep me safe. Stuck within this maze encompassing my brain.
Keep me, oh keep me safe.
Hello! Hello! Hi, B. I know you just saw me in chat, boo. I did not. I was meant to go live at, like right on the dot, but I was a couple minutes late because I decided to talk in chat, boo, for 2 minutes. I was like, I have enough time, completely forgetting that I needed to turn on my laptop to look at chat. And chat boo over stream. So true, so true. No, I probably wasn't even gonna look at chat. I didn't even plan to look at chat boo, but I saw somebody was like new-ish, like that one person that hadn't been in, like, that hadn't watched Rumbu's stream for like 2 years. They were a they had Killjoy in their name, and I was like, "Ha, Killjoy, like MCR Killjoy, like Danger Days," and turns out I was right, and it was a wholesome experience. But I was like, "Oh shit, I have to stream in like 1 minute," which ended up being 3 because I needed to open my laptop And it took forever for things to fucking load. But, hey, 2 minutes... 2 minutes late is no big deal. Also, if any viewers aren't aware, you said... Yeah, it's like, I didn't want to say I have to stream, because then, like, because then I was like, that's kind of self-promo-y, and that is no. That is no. But anyway, if there's any new viewers or viewers that haven't seen my stream in a while, probably newbie, no judgment, I get it. My YouTube channel is now, has now been repurposed into a VODs channel. I've been uploading all of my like, I've had all my VODs saved for, like, a couple that I accidentally deleted, like, a couple years ago. And then there are some that I just straight up deleted because I don't want that shit on the internet anymore. Like, I read Heat Waves back in 2021, 2022. I do not want that shit on the internet anymore. So I just straight up deleted them. Yeah. I'm not proud of that. It was actually, reading that was my intro into, like, reading things on stream. First it was that, then it was Passerin, and then for, like, 1 or 2 streams, I read this, like, one, like, Dream SMP, like, X-reader, but not really X-reader. It was just, like, the reader was... Wait, no, it was kind of an X-reader story. Because I forgot that X-reader isn't always romantic. It was a rough time for me, okay? I was trying to look for, like, the Dream SMP fix on Wattpad, worst mistake of my life. That's what X means? It's not a ship, it wasn't a ship, at least not from what I remember. I was just going through the VODs of it earlier on today, and, like, to see what happened, but it was just to see if that was the only thing I did during that stream or not. The only thing, it was like a text, like a group chat kind of thing. Yeah, I know that's romance, but there was no romance involved. But it was like a plus reader? I'm just gonna say plus reader. Because I don't know. It was like a group chat fic, with, like, every Dream SMP member. And I was like, ooh, I don't want that. I do not want that. No. Anyway, I did other things, but my point was, I've been uploading, it's been a long process, but I've been uploading every VOD that I've had saved, onto my VODs channel, and once I'm caught up with that, my streams are going to go onto the VODs channel. You can find it there. If you want to, look at any of my old VODs, if you want to see, the entirety of me reading Passerin, all of those VODs are up on the VODs channel now. So I will apologize in advance. I was not the best at sound balancing, back then, and I still am not. It's hard for me to tell sometimes. So some of the VODs are very quiet. And I am so sorry, in advance. But yeah, I remember those days. Oh God. Also, keep an eye how I don't have to turn to 80. Now I don't have to turn to 80. Shut the fuck up. Oh, it's telling me an ad's about to start. Ads help streamer. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, keep an eye out on my TikTok. I'm gonna be posting a couple cool things later on tonight after stream. Something about, certain cosplay? Stay tuned for that. Follow my TikTok if you want to see. Alright. Now let's do what I actually am, like, is the point of the stream. Chapter 14 of Through a Glass Divine. If you're not caught up with the story of Through a Glass Divine, it is an SBI fanfic written by Bones and the Bees. After I finish reading this, I'm probably going to veer away. I'm going to veer away from Dream SMP / SBI fanfics. Mainly because I don't really feel comfortable with that anymore. But what I want to do, though, is I want to start reading some Generation Lost fanfic. So if any of you have any suggestions, there's a suggestions channel in my Discord. Recommend me some fics to read. Alright. So, Through a Glass Divine, SBI fanfic, Wilbur is a prophet that gets kidnapped by a bunch of what are deemed like cult people. Word of warning, you're not gonna find super long ones. That's fair. That's honestly fair. I don't mind. Let's see. Or just any fics in general that you want me to read. As long as they're not NSFW, I do not feel comfortable reading those on stream. Unless it's from AU artists made up before we knew which NLOS would be. So, Wilbur, or the Pythia, gets kidnapped by the Deathlings and experiences religious trauma. Also, I don't know if I'm going to have time or motivation to stream the next few days. So this very well may be my last stream back home before I head back up to college. I love religious trauma. So true. Alright, let's see. Boop. Boop. There we go. I also have some new channel point redemptions. What ones did I add? I know there's one that's like me play a song or something. I shouldn't have pointed that out. I'm trying to get to the point of the stream. Let's see. Alright. You redeemed, play a song. Yeah, okay, they're supposed to be clay balls, but the thing is, you know how you're supposed to upload, like, different, like, pixels, like a different, number of pixels by a different number of pixels, like 3 different times? I tried doing that, and it still didn't work. So, Okay. Let me pause the music. What, any requests? Do you want me to play it on ukulele, guitar? It's your choice. You're the one that redeemed the points. Guitar.
Okay.
If you no, it's okay. If you don't have any clues, but if you don't have any ideas, I know plenty of songs. I can. There's actually kind of one song that I wanted to play on stream. Where is my capo? Where is my capo? Shit. 1 second. Where is my capo? I know I put it in here. Did I? Where is my... I know I had it. Oh. I put my capo in the wrong spot of my guitar case. Alright. I just need to... I might pause here and there because I need to scroll to, like, get the lyrics or the chords. Oh, I forgot someone texted me. Oh, just Twitch login verification codes. Oh, Jesus, I missed so many fucking Twitter notifications. Jesus. Okay, 1 second. There's a song that not a lot of people my age or younger know. You might recognize the singer's name from being in, like, one episode of The Last of Us. Let's see. Where is it? Here it is. Capo, 2nd fret. Alright. Let me make sure my guitar's in tune. I think I literally played it this morning, but still. This one needs to be lowered a bit. Okay. If you still have a song that you want me to play, I'll play it instead. But if you still don't have a clue, this one will suffice. Okay. Let's see. Leave some space in my chair. Okay. It's, the song isn't in The Last of Us, but the singer, had a song that was in it. Her name is Linda Ronstadt. The song is called Blue Bayou. So bad I gotta work. I need to scroll. Where those fishing boats with their sails afloat, if I could only see that familiar sunrise through sleepy eyes, how happy I'd be. Gonna see my baby. Nope. Gonna see my baby again. Gonna be with some of my friends. Maybe I'll feel better again on Blue Bayou. Saving nickels, saving dimes, working till the sun don't shine. Looking forward to happier times on Blue Bayou. I'm going back someday, come what may, to Blue Bayou, where the folks are fine and the world is mine on Blue Bayou, where those fishing boats with their sails afloat, if I could only see that familiar sunrise through sleepy eyes, how happy I'd be. Oh, that boy of mine by my side, the silver moon and the evening tide. Oh, some sweet day gonna take away this hurt inside. Will I never be blue? My dreams come true on Blue Bayou. There we go. Did you? You sound so surprised that I've done this before. Well, not the song, but like I've sung before. Like you've heard me sing before, haven't you? Oh. I need to every time I'm going to say I need to like fix my settings. I am so sorry, B. I am so sorry. Oh my god. Oh, I'm not surprised, it's just so good. Okay, okay. I'm so sorry. I keep forgetting to... I have no idea how to fix it. Yeah, that's what I'm going to college for. Although I don't know if I'm going to, like, go through with it after I get my degree. At least not for a while. Because being a teacher would mean that I'd probably, like, any accounts on any social media that I'd have would have to be either private or family friendly. And I don't want that. I don't want to do that. Gonna be honest. Clueless use a voice changer. Anyway. It's taken me 30 minutes to read this goddamn chapter. Just the most atrocious voice ever. Alright. Let's do this. Chapter 14. An impossible choice. Summary. A much-needed explanation. Okay, trigger warnings for this chapter. Talk of a suicide attempt. Oh no, which one? My baby, I will protect them. Descriptions of injuries, mentions of blood. Okay. So in the previous chapter, Tommy, who the Pythia has, like, grown attached to, even though he was the one that kidnapped him in the first place, excuse me, went out on a supply run with Jack Manifold. They both come back and Jack is like, he tried to kill me! And I'm like, bro, what? They're the best of friends. Like, what happened? And they left on that cliffhanger. Oh boy. Let's see where this goes. I'm scared. It was quiet enough to hear a pin drop as Jack's accusation hung in the air above their heads. The Pythia glanced between Tommy and Jack, struggling to match what he'd just heard with the scene going on in front of him. There was blood dripping down Jack's face from what looked like a gash on his forehead, and one of his legs seemed to be twisted in a way that would definitely have made him pass out from the pain if it wasn't a prosthetic. He had one arm wrapped around Nikki's shoulder, but his mismatched eyes were focused solely on Tommy. Oh, another thing about this this universe is that it's like a cyberpunk universe. A lot of people have, like, especially in the Deathlings, have a lot of prosthetic stuff. Like cybernetic prosthetics. He'd never seen Jack genuinely angry before, but it was a terrifying thing. The fire burning behind his eyes was red hot, and the Pythia wondered how Tommy hadn't shrunk back from it. Then, he looked back at Tommy. Tommy was swaying on his feet, his jaw clenched and hands curled into fists at his sides as he was pinned under Jack's glare. A long silence stretched between the two of them, all eyes in the room soon following Jack's example to land on Tommy. They were waiting. And waiting. And waiting. Tommy? Phil's voice broke through the tension, and Tommy flinched at the sound of his name. Phil was standing a few feet away from Jack, his brows furrowed like he wasn't sure what he was witnessing. Tommy, Phil repeated again, taking a step towards him. Without thinking, the Pythia moved closer to Tommy's side. Is this true? Another beat. Then, Tommy gave a small nod. And just like that, chaos broke. What the fuck, Tommy? Nikki exclaimed, her voice cracking as she jumped to her feet. The Pythia tensed, but before Nikki could move towards them, Techno was placing a hand on her shoulder. Nikki, no! He tried to kill my best friend, and I want to know why! Nikki shouted, ripping her arm out of Techno's grip. This is insane! He's insane! This... Nikki, Techno repeated, louder this time. We'll figure out what happened later. Right now, we need to get Jack to the infirmary. Can you help me carry him? It was obviously a ploy to keep Nikki's attention away from Tommy until she could calm down. Nikki herself seemed to know this, but Techno's words still made her pause. She glanced between Jack and Tommy, her eyes starting to shine with tears as she took in the blood dried across Jack's face, and the sorry state his leg was in. The Pythia noticed how she didn't look at him once. It was as if he'd turned invisible the moment he moved next to Tommy. Fine, she forced out after a moment. Get him out of my sight, though. Tommy flinched again. Phil looked as though he wanted to reach out, but before he could move closer to them. Phil, can you help us? Techno called out. We need someone to balance him. Phil spared one last look at Tommy, before sighing and moving back to help Jack. Everyone seemed to be rushing around as they worked together to get Jack to his feet, with Jack shouting out in pain and Nikki whispering reassurances. Everyone was moving. Everyone was talking. Everyone was focused on Jack. Except for the Pythia. Tommy had never been this quiet before. He wasn't moving as he watched Jack get yanked to his feet. His face wasn't changing, and the Pythia was fairly sure he hadn't even blinked. It was almost like he was a shell, and the realization made another jolt of fear echo through the Pythia's chest. He needed to get Tommy out of here, away from the noise and the accusations and anger. It was strange how easily the Pythia slipped his fingers into Tommy's again. He didn't think as he led Tommy out of the main chamber, and he didn't consider the consequences of dragging Tommy away from this mess right now. None of it mattered to him. At that moment, all he could think about was getting Tommy away from Nikki and Jack. Do you want to go to your room or mine? He asked quietly as he and Tommy made their way to the bedrooms. Tommy blinked. For a moment, the Pythia didn't know if he was going to respond. Then, so low he could barely hear it. Mine. Okay. He could do that. The cacophony of voices faded behind them as they turned down the corridor. Tommy's hand was barely gripping his own, but the Pythia refused to let go. He guided Tommy toward the door with a cow painted across the front and wondered if he was going to need a passcode to get in. But when he tried the handle, the door opened up without a fight, and the Pythia breathed a sigh of relief. It was only after he stepped through the doorway that he realized this was the first time he was properly seeing Tommy's room. The last time he'd been in Tommy's room was during his escape attempt, which made his throat close up whenever he thought back to that night. He'd been in a haze of panic and hadn't taken the time to register what Tommy's room actually looked like, so it was as if he was seeing it for the first time as he guided Tommy to sit down on his bed. The one thing he'd noticed the first time he'd been in there were multicolored clouds painted across the walls. They were puffy and perfectly shaped, shimmering in shades of orange, pink, purple, and blue. Above their heads, there were also stars painted across the ceiling, although there were only a few spattered here and there compared to the starry ceiling outside of Nikki's tattoo parlor. Even still, the silver and gold paint glittered in the pale light, making them look as though they were twinkling, like they were alive. The painted stars were moving, but Tommy was not. Every step he took was robotic, as if he'd forgotten how to walk, and was only managing it by following the Pythia's example. He led Tommy over to the thin mattress and blankets piled in the corner, pushing on his shoulders so he would sit down. The Pythia let go of Tommy's hands so he could crouch in front of him. "Where are you hurt?" Tommy looked down at himself, at the bruises dotting his arms and the blood staining his fingers like he hadn't even realized it was there. Slowly, he lifted his hands and patted his own chest, wincing when he brushed the side of his torso. His hands shook as he lifted the edge of his shirt up, revealing a small gash on his side stained with blood. The Pythia sucked in a breath between his teeth. "Shit, did a knife do that?" Tommy shook his head. "No." He paused, brows furrowing like he was struggling to remember what happened. "It was, glass, I think. I had to crawl through a broken window at one point." "Fuck, Tommy," the Pythia muttered, leaning in closer to see the wound. Making sure the music isn't too loud. It wasn't actively bleeding anymore, and while he wasn't a doctor, he was pretty sure that was a good sign. It still needed treatment, though. "Okay, we'll deal with that. Is there anything else?" The Pythia was surprised at how calm he was. He'd never had to deal with a situation like this before, and while he knew he should have been more worried about what Jack had said, he couldn't find it in himself to care right now. Because Tommy was injured, and if everyone else was going to be swarming Jack, he could at least make sure Tommy got patched up as well. "Nothing serious," Tommy said after a few moments, eyeing the scrapes on his non-prosthetic hand. "Then this blood." He reached up, gently grabbing Tommy's chin to turn his blood-splattered cheek towards him. "It's from Jack?" Tommy tensed. Then he nodded. The Pythia let out a slow breath, dropping his hand from Tommy's face. He still had no idea what happened there, but he wasn't really worried about that at the moment. Right now, he was dealing with things one at a time. A quick glance around Tommy's room told him that there were no bandages or disinfectant in there. That meant he was going to have to get it from somewhere else. And of course, the most logical place to get those things would be from Punk's infirmary. "Stay here," he told Tommy, already heading for the door. "I'm gonna go get some stuff to patch you up with." "The infirmary is next to Sam's workshop," Tommy told him. His eyes glazed over as he stared at the wall. He nodded, shooting Tommy one last concerned look before forcing himself to hurry out the door. His stomach twisted itself into knots as he walked down the corridor and back into the main chamber of the temple. There were so many questions bouncing around his head right now. Of course he wanted to know what the fuck happened to make Tommy try to kill Jack, but he also wanted to know if they'd run into police. He wanted to know how they'd gotten their injuries. He wanted to know if Jack had fought back, or if Tommy had taken him by surprise. Too many questions that only Tommy and Jack could answer. But neither of them were in a state to do so. Which meant... wait. The Pythia stopped dead in his tracks underneath the statue of Kristen. The main chamber was empty now, with the group presumably having gone to the infirmary to stay close to Jack. The main chamber of the temple was empty, except for the Pythia. The Pythia was alone. Up until now, the Pythia had always moved around the temple with a guard at his side. The only time he hadn't done that was during his escape attempt. But right now, Tommy was back in his room, and Nikki was in the infirmary with Jack. There was no guard at his shoulder. He'd been so focused on taking care of Tommy, the Pythia hadn't realized that he just left Tommy's room on his own. Now he wondered if Tommy had understood that when he watched him leave. If Tommy trusted that he wasn't going to go anywhere. Or if he was too out of it to even fully register what was going on. The Pythia's eyes flickered to the vault door that sat at the opposite end of the chamber from Kristen's statue. It was unguarded. Unguarded, but shut and locked like it always was, unless someone was coming or going. If the Pythia tried to escape right now, it would probably be a futile attempt. Maybe Clara would want him to try anyway. There was always the possibility that in the chaos of everything, someone had forgotten to lock the door when they shut it again. The chance was low, but it was there. But it's not like he cared either way. Goosebumps rose along his arms as he continued making his way to Ponk's infirmary. He passed through the next hall, leaving the main chamber behind. He could hear voices echoing in the distance, and the closer he got to Nikki's tattoo parlor and Sam's workshop, the louder they became. It turned out that Ponk's infirmary was right next to Sam's workshop. The door had been propped open, with light far brighter than the dim purple glow he'd grown used to shining out from it. The Pythia stepped into the doorway, eyes darting around to take in the room. The infirmary had the same layout as Nikki's tattoo parlor, with even the same stone bed pressed against a wall. Several more comfortable-looking cots had been shoved into the room as well, while dozens of floating lights hovered near the ceiling. Several people were crowded around a single cot, which the Pythia guessed Jack was in, but wasn't sure since he couldn't see him through the bodies. He could just make out Ponk bent over the head of the cot, his brows furrowed in concentration as he did, something that the Pythia couldn't see from this angle. He spotted the back of Nikki's head on the other side of the bed, sitting on a flimsy-looking chair with her hands twisting in her lap. Phil stood beside Nikki with a hand resting on her shoulder, while Sam had positioned himself at the end of the bed, his face cut into a deep frown. Then, standing closest to the door and subsequently closest to him, was Techno. Techno, who noticed the Pythia the same time he noticed him. The two stared at each other for a moment, Techno blinking like he'd been the last person he'd been expecting to show up. Can I help you?" Techno asked after a moment. "Shit. Tommy's got a few minor injuries," he said before he could think twice. "I came here to get some bandages and disinfectant." Techno considered this for a moment, his eyes flickering between the Pythia and the others in the infirmary. "Go wait outside. I'll bring him out." The Pythia gladly took the out he was given, stepping away from the door and out of sight of everyone else. Emotions were still running high, and he didn't want to distract Ponk from his work on Jack by reminding him or Nikki of Tommy again. It only took a moment of waiting before Techno stepped out with a small first aid kit in his hand. When his eyes landed on the Pythia, he paused, eyes darting around before falling back on him. "Where's Tommy?" he asked. "Fuck. In his room?" the Pythia explained, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Techno stared at him. So you walked over here on your own? Clenching his jaw, the Pythia nodded. Yeah. Seconds ticked on, the tension crackling in the air between them. Techno's eyes were narrowed, like he wasn't sure whether to be upset about this or not. Let me walk back over with you, Techno said after nearly a minute. I want to see how Tommy's doing anyway. Yeah, that was fair. Drink break. Taking the first aid kit from Techno's hands, the Pythia started back down the corridor, while Techno followed close behind. The two were silent as they passed through the main chamber. With every step, he could feel Techno's eyes burning a hole into the back of his skull, like he was waiting for him to make a break for the exit. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, creating a disjointed rhythm that was anything but soothing. The Pythia kept his hands wrapped tightly around the first aid kit. His only focus right now was taking care of Tommy. He held the door open for Techno as they made their way back into Tommy's, room. Sorry, I was drinking soda. Tommy hadn't moved from his spot on the bed, but when he looked over to see who the Pythia had brought back with him, some of the fog dissipated from his eyes. Techno? He asked, frowning as the two of them approached the bed. Hey, Techno said, crouching down in front of Tommy. You doing all right? Tommy blinked, before looking back at the wall. I'm fine. Techno raised an eyebrow. Really? Because you're kinda covered in blood. Most is Jack's. Tommy shrugged, his voice strained. But some is yours, Techno counted. Let me see what we're working with. Although Tommy seemed like he didn't want to show Techno, it only took a single look for Tommy's resolve to shrivel up. He sighed and lifted his shirt again, showing Techno the gash he got from the glass. Techno's brows furrowed. Ouch. That looks like it stings. Tommy shrugged again, although the movement made him wince. I don't think it's deep enough to need stitches, but I'm gonna have to disinfect it, Techno told him, already digging around the first aid kit. Pythia, do you want to clean those scrapes on his hand while I handle this? The Pythia jolted when Techno addressed him. When Techno had said he was coming with, the Pythia assumed he wouldn't want him anywhere near Tommy's injuries. He was strangely relieved that wasn't the case. Yeah, of course, he muttered, waiting for Techno to finish pouring disinfectant on a cotton round. When Techno handed him the bottle, he grabbed his own cotton round, hands shaking as he poured the liquid on it. The sharp smell of chemicals stung his nose, but he ignored it as he gently took Tommy's hand in his own, eyeing the scrapes painting his knuckles. Techno started patting the cotton round on Tommy's side, and he let out a hiss of pain. Do you want me to wait until Techno's done disinfecting the other one? The Pythia asked, keeping his voice low. Gritting his teeth, Tommy shook his head. No, just another wince. Just do it at the same time. Nodding, the Pythia took a deep breath to try and steady his hands. Then, he began to dab the cotton over the scrapes. Tommy flinched when the cotton touched his fingers, but didn't make a sound as he and Techno worked in parallel to clean off Tommy's wounds. He tried to be as gentle as possible, not wanting to make this any worse for Tommy than it already was. While he'd never cleaned off a wound before, the scrapes weren't bad. There was just dirt lingering on his skin that needed to be wiped off. Techno poured some more disinfectant onto a new cotton round. Tommy bit back a whimper when he resumed cleaning the gash. We're almost done, the Pythia reassured Tommy. Just try to breathe through the pain. Tommy sucked in a lungful of air right as the Pythia said this, as if he'd forgotten all about breathing until the reminder. He let out the breath slowly, his shoulders slumping as Techno finally moved the cotton round away. That is so true. Like, you have no idea how much breathing helps in, like, painful situations. When I got my eyebrow piercing, the piercer, lovely person. She reminded me right beforehand, like, and also during it, because I guess for a moment I forgot to breathe. Like, make sure to keep breathing. And then, like, when the piercing was going through, she was like, don't forget to breathe. I sucked in a breath, and all of a sudden, all of the pain went away. One glance at Tommy's hand told the Pythia that his scrapes were clean as well, and he set the cotton round aside to reach for some pain relief ointment. He could feel Techno's eyes lingering on him, like he was confused about what he was seeing. But the Pythia ignored him as he focused on spreading the ointment over the scrapes. Then, he grabbed a few bandages and began to wrap them around Tommy's fingers, while Techno tore open a larger bandage to place over the gash. They worked in silence for another minute. Once both he and Techno were finished placing the bandages, Techno shoved the trash in his pockets before closing up the first aid kit. The Pythia glanced at the first aid kit and then back at Tommy's face, which was still stained with blood. Do you have a washcloth or something? Tommy furrowed his brows. In my bathroom, I think. Nodding, the Pythia got to his feet and walked over to the bathroom. It was identical to his own, only holding a sink and a toilet. But thankfully, there was also a small cloth hanging over the edge of the sink. He ran some water over it, squeezing out the excess before walking back in to sit in front of Tommy again. Here, you should clean your face off, he said, holding out the damp cloth to Tommy. Tommy stared at the cloth for a moment, like he wasn't sure what to do with it. As the seconds ticked on with Tommy making no move to take it, the Pythia spared a glance at Techno before sighing and reaching for his face. Hold still, then, he muttered, ignoring the weight of Techno's stare as he carefully began to wipe the dried blood off Tommy's cheek. The blood stained the beige cloth a deep brownish red color. He was careful not to tug on Tommy's skin too much, ignoring the pit that was forming in his gut the longer Tommy stared at the wall. barely reacting to what was going on around him. Suddenly, the door to the bedroom creaked open. Hey, what's... Phil cut himself off the moment his eyes landed on the Pythia, his gaze flickering between the washcloth he had in his hand and the blood slowly being cleaned off of Tommy's face. It's okay, Phil. Techno cut in right as Phil's eyes narrowed. He's just cleaning the blood off Tommy's face. A beat passed. The suspicion didn't disappear from Phil's gaze, but he didn't let him get away from Tommy. But he didn't tell him to get away from Tommy. The Pythia took that as a sign to resume what he was doing. I was just coming in here to see how you were doing, Tom, Phil said as he walked over, crouching down on the other side of the Pythia. Is everything okay? Tommy blinked, his cheek bright red but no longer covered in blood as the Pythia pulled the washcloth away from his skin. I wasn't seriously hurt. Phil frowned. Let me see. Techno could tell you. Let me see, Phil repeated, his words taking on a sharp edge. Huffing, Tommy turned so Phil could see that the side was injured, and tugged the edge of his shirt up to show Techno's bandaging job. The bandage Techno had placed covered the gash completely. There was a bit of blood seeping through, but it seemed slow enough that it was going to stop fairly soon. While Phil narrowed his eyes at the wound, the Pythia found his gaze being drawn to something else. He hadn't noticed it until now, but part of Tommy's ribs were visible with his shirt lifted like this. And on his ribs, the Pythia noticed a tattoo he hadn't seen before. It was a vine. A leafy vine that was drawn in a way where it seemed to be snaking under his rib and back over it again. Although the Pythia only saw one side of his torso, he guessed that the vine wrapped around the entirety of his chest. Was that new? Or was that an older tattoo he just hadn't seen before? Before he could think about it too much, Tommy dropped the edge of his shirt again, and Phil's voice startled him out of his thoughts. That's it? Nothing more serious? Phil pushed. Tommy shook his head. No, that was the worst of it. Letting out a slow breath, Phil leaned back and nodded. The relief on his face was plain to see, even if there was still tension lining his shoulders. Silence fell over the group again. The Pythia resisted the urge to shrink away from Phil, who was sitting so close their shoulders were nearly brushing. Instead, he let his knee bump against Tommy's, and Tommy immediately shifted his leg closer. A minute passed. Tommy squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, before he straightened his shoulders to look up at Phil. Are you going to ask? It was the loudest Tommy had spoken since he got back to the temple. His voice was hoarse, but he didn't flinch as Phil's eyes met his own. Are you okay to talk about it right now? Phil questioned. Tommy clenched his jaw, eyes darting to the ground again. I mean, I'm gonna have to explain it eventually, he said, wrapping his arms around himself. Might as well do it while it's fresh. Techno and Phil shared an unreadable look. Do you want him to leave? Phil then asked, gesturing to the Pythia. The Pythia's heart skipped a beat at the idea of leaving Tommy when he was so out of it, But if Tommy didn't want him to hear this, of course he would go. To his surprise, though, Tommy shook his head. "No. I want him here," he said, his eyes locking on the blindfold. Relief washed over the Pythia as he reached out a hand as a silent offer. Tommy didn't hesitate, and his metal fingers were cool against his own. "Okay. Then, yeah, we'd like to know what went down out there," Techno continued. Only letting his eyes linger on their linked hands for a moment before focusing on Tommy's face. "Jack said you tried to kill him, and you agreed with that." Tommy's breathing hitched as he nodded again, shoulders curling further in on himself. "Yeah, I did." He paused to collect himself, and the Pythia squeezed his fingers. I wasn't trying. Well, I was, but... He cut himself off. The Pythia's chest ached. "Just start from the beginning," Phil said, his voice soft. "We ran into the cops," Tommy began, forcing himself to look up again. "Things were going fine, until the cops showed up out of fucking nowhere. Usually we get at least, some kind of warning from the sensors, but there wasn't jack shit this time. One minute we were fine, and the next we had fucking guns pointed at us." The Pythia flinched after hearing that, but Tommy kept going. "We didn't have time to grab anything, we just had to run. There were only a few of them, but they were blocking the way out, so I had to smash a window. We crawled into the fire escape and managed to get to the roof, but the pigs fucking followed us up there too." Tommy's eyes were shut again, and he was shaking his head as he ran through the memory. "Me and Jack were running across the rooftops to try and lose them, but these pricks just wouldn't let up. We kept running, but Jack's legs were giving him shit, and my lungs were starting to fuck up, and soon we were fucking cornered." Tommy's hand was squeezing his own tight enough to bruise now, but the Pythia didn't pull away. "And the thing is, you know how these guys are. I don't think they knew we were deathlings, but they were still talking about how inconvenient it was to drag us off the roof and back to the station. Me and Jack were hidden behind some electrical boxes right on the edge of the roof at this point, but they knew we were back there. They were just waiting for us to make a break for it so they'd have an excuse to shoot us." His voice cracked on that last part, and from the corner of his eye, the Pythia saw Phil wince. I couldn't stop thinking about how it was a no-win situation. If we tried to run, they're going to shoot us. If we let them arrest us, once they saw our tattoos, they'd kill us so it didn't get leaked to the press or anything. And that's if they didn't try to interrogate us first." His shoulders were shaking now, and Techno reached out a hand to rest on Tommy's arm. Tommy flinched away from the touch, and Techno quickly pulled back. Still, Tommy didn't let go of the Pythia's hand. I was freaking the fuck out. I didn't want the cops to get a chance to question us, but I didn't want to get shot by those bastards either. He took a shaky breath. Jack was still trying to brainstorm ways we could escape, but I knew it was fucking hopeless. I knew it, and he didn't. And he wouldn't listen to me when I said it was, and I Another pause. I pushed him, Tommy confessed, his whisper sounding like a gunshot in the silence. I just didn't want to give those assholes the satisfaction of killing us. If we were going to see Kristen, I thought we should do it on our own terms. So I pushed Jack off the roof and then I jumped after him. Oh. All three of them stared at Tommy for a long moment. Silence hung over them like a cloud, the lightning inside just waiting to strike. The fall wasn't high enough? Techno asked after nearly 2 minutes. Tommy nodded. I didn't see it when I jumped. We couldn't from the angle we were at, but we landed in a fucking dumpster. I think Jack clipped his head on some glass in there, which is how he got that nasty cut that bled all over the fucking place. And his leg probably hit something on the way down, but I don't know. My lungs fucked up again and all the air got knocked out of them, so I was just laying there suffocating and praying to Kristen that the cops wouldn't be able to see that we survived the fall from up on the roof. And they didn't. Phil concluded. No, they didn't see us. They left after that. And once I could move again, I tried to help Jack out of the dumpster and he started screaming at me. Tommy said, clenching his jaw. I tried to explain why I did that, but he didn't care. He just kept saying I tried to kill him. Because you did. Phil agreed, making Tommy flinch. Yeah, I did, he muttered. But we were gonna die either way. I figured it was better to go out on our own terms. But that's not what you did. Techno cut in, his words gentle but firm. Jack wasn't going out on his own terms. He was going out on your terms. You didn't give him a choice. You just made the decision for him. I know, but we know it wasn't coming from a place of malice. Phil interrupted. That's a violation of Death's laws. You can't decide for another deathling when they're going to die. Tommy nodded. I know. I just wasn't thinking straight. Phil and Techno shared another look. There was something almost like guilt flashing in Phil's eyes. Like he felt responsibility for what Tommy had done. And in a way, the Pythia supposed Phil was. Because he'd questioned Tommy's casual attitude towards death before, and it seemed like the consequences of this were starting to rear their heads. Then, Phil sighed and moved forward, the Pythia letting go of Tommy's hand to let Phil wrap his arms around Tommy and pull him into a hug. I'm so fucking glad you're okay, he whispered into Tommy's hair. And I'm not saying I don't understand why you did it, because I do. But you fucked up, Tom. I think you know that. Nodding again, Tommy buried his face into Phil's shoulder, and Phil ran a hand up and down his back. Me and Techno are gonna have to talk some things over, so I think it'll be best if you avoid Jack for the time being. And Nikki. Techno chimed in. I think she's about ready to take your head off. Probably, Tommy muttered, his voice muffled by Phil's shirt. After another moment, Tommy pulled back from the hug, wrapping his arms around himself and leaning his back against the wall. He glanced between Phil, Techno, and the Pythia. His face now startlingly pale without the blood smeared across it. "You should try to get some rest, mate," Phil said, pushing to his feet. "You've had a long day." Tommy rested his chin on his knees. "All right." Phil stood above Tommy, looking unsure as to if he should leave or not. After another beat, Techno reached out, squeezing Tommy's shoulder. "I'm glad you're okay, kid," he murmured, before standing up as well. Tommy only hummed in response. Phil and Techno's eyes then landed on the Pythia, who was still sitting in front of Tommy. The Pythia clenched his jaw, glancing between them and Tommy as he debated whether or not to argue with them. But Tommy seemed tired, and the Pythia didn't want to make him feel worse than he already did. His knees protested as he pushed to his feet. He gave Tommy a small nod, but Tommy's eyes had fallen back to the ground. Worry twisted in his gut again, but it didn't seem like Techno and Phil were too keen to let him stay here with Tommy when he was so out of it. Techno unlocked the door between their rooms. He didn't say anything to the Pythia, his face set in a deep frown like he was lost in his own thoughts. Then the door slammed shut, and the Pythia was alone. Again. For a few minutes, the Pythia just stood there, unsure of what to do with himself. There was so much that had just happened, and none of it was even relevant to him. It didn't stop him from thinking about it all the same. It didn't stop him from turning Tommy's story over and over again in his mind, noting the nausea that rose in his throat, thinking of the impossible choice Tommy had been forced to make. He should have been upset with Tommy, horrified even. The rumors he'd always heard about the Deathlings sounded exactly like that. That they had such a flippant attitude towards death, they would kill each other without a second thought if they thought it would please their goddess. But this wasn't a faceless, terrifying Deathling he'd been told stories about. This was Tommy. Tommy had been scared. He thought he was going to die and wanted to give him and Jack a better death than at the hands of the police. The way he went about it was wrong, but his intent was anything but malicious. And for that, the Pythia couldn't find it in himself to be mad at Tommy. More than anything, he was just worried about Tommy. He'd never seen him so quiet before. His eyes had never looked so faded, not even after the Pythia tried to kill him. The Pythia sat on the edge of his own bed, eyes fixed on the door between his and Tommy's rooms, like if he stared long enough, he'd be able to see through it. The worry gnawed at his insides like a dying animal. Tommy could take care of himself. He knew that. But he just looked broken. Minutes ticked by. Maybe an hour. The Pythia couldn't tell. He was too lost in thought, wondering what tomorrow was going to be like. how the routine was going to change yet again. As if he summoned it through sheer force of will, a knock at the shared door between his and Tommy's rooms jolted him out of his thoughts. "Hey." Tommy's soft voice called through the door. "You still awake?" There was a shyness in Tommy's words that the Pythia wasn't used to hearing from him. Hesitation, like he was prepared to be rejected for a question he hadn't even asked yet. "I'm awake," he called back. There was a pause, and the Pythia continued with, "Do you want to come in?" The door creaked open, like Tommy had just been waiting for the okay. He poked his head in, eyes darting around until they found the Pythia sitting on the edge of his bed. Blinking a few times, Tommy walked over to sit beside him. He was silent for a few moments. The Pythia waited for him to speak. "I couldn't sleep," he finally admitted, eyes fixed on his lap. "Yeah, can't imagine it'd be easy to sleep after all that," the Pythia murmured. Nodding, Tommy wrung his hands together, the bandages wrapped around his fingers already starting to fray. "I understand why you did it," the Pythia then said, wanting Tommy to know he wasn't upset with him. "I mean, of course I don't agree with it, but I understand why you thought that was the best option at the time." "You don't have to lie to me," Tommy scoffed, his shoulders curling in. "I know you hate that kind of deathling shit." There was an unsaid part of his words that the Pythia didn't miss. "I know you hate that kind of deathling shit," was Tommy implying that the Pythia might hate him for what he did, for being the deathling stereotype he used to criticize so vocally. "No, Tommy, I understand," he said, scooting closer so their shoulders were brushing. "I don't think you're a bad person for doing what you did." "Nikki thinks I am," Tommy pointed out, wrapping his arms around his knees. "Phil and Techno probably do too. Nikki, well, she might think that, yeah." He relented, remembering the fury burning in her eyes. "But Phil and Techno don't." Tommy scoffed again. "Yeah, they do. Trust me, they don't," he pushed. "But even if they did, I don't think it would change how much those two care about you." Although Tommy seemed doubtful, he nodded anyway. A few beats ticked by. "You're being a lot nicer about this than I thought you'd be," Tommy admitted, his voice small. He couldn't blame Tommy. A month ago, this would have been something that sent him reeling back, cursing himself for getting so close to Tommy and forgetting what he was. But this wasn't a month ago. Things had changed. Considering we've both managed to move past you kidnapping me and me trying to kill you, I'd be surprised if there's anything either of us could do to truly piss the other off. He joked, although it was a weak attempt. Tommy snorted. "Let's see if you say that after I try to push you off a roof." "That would just be you getting even with me for the murder attempt," he shot back, nudging Tommy's shoulder. A small smile flickered across Tommy's face at that, although it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. More silence hung between them, although it wasn't suffocating by any means. It was calm, comfortable even. A space for Tommy to breathe. "Wilbur?" Tommy then said, looking up to meet his blindfold. "Yeah?" A pause. Tommy let out a soft huff. "You responded to your name." "Oh." The bird perked up, and he waited for the nausea, for the anxiety to twist his gut, for the dread and fear and everything that came with Tommy pointing things like that out. It never did, though. His worry was solely focused on Tommy right now, and it seemed like nothing could break that. Not even his responsibility to Clara. Right now, he couldn't even find it in himself to be upset about that. Wilbur was a part of himself he gave up a long time ago. He'd locked the name in the back of his mind, and even though he'd grown numb to hearing Tommy say it, he still felt distant from that person he used to be. Someone who didn't know he was hollow inside. Someone who thought the breath that flowed through his lungs was his own and didn't belong to anyone else. The Pythia wasn't made to be comforting. He was empty. A vessel that was supposed to sit above the common problems of humanity. In contrast, Tommy was so utterly human. He was loud and abrasive, an overflowing cup of things like life, excitement, anger, fear. He was everything the Pythia wasn't. There was nothing hollow about Tommy. Right now, though, Tommy was depleted. His eyes were glazed over and his hands were shaking. He didn't need an empty vessel right now. He needed a person to tell him everything was going to be okay. For right now, he could be Wilbur. For Tommy. "I could tell you off for calling me that if you want," Wilbur joked, lightly elbowing him in the side. Tommy elbowed him back, another brief smile flashing across his face. "I think I've heard enough of your complaining to last me a lifetime, man. I complain a perfectly normal amount for someone in my situation," Wilbur shot back. "Why? Because you were kidnapped?" Tommy teased. Wilbur rolled his eyes, despite Tommy not being able to see it. "Oh, I just noticed. Instead of the narrator referring to Wilbur as the Pythia, it's now Wilbur." "I've been waiting so long for this shift." Wilbur rolled his eyes despite Tommy not being able to see it. "No, because I have to eat fucking soy eggs every day." "You're so dramatic, Will," Tommy huffed. "Also, your opinion on food and shit doesn't count because you literally drank Moontane. Oh, do not bring this up again." The two fell into their usual pattern of bickering for the next few minutes. Although there was a certain nervousness to Tommy's jabs that wasn't usually there, and although they were both going a bit soft on each other compared to their normal verbal sparring, it was far closer to normalcy than Wilbur had expected it to be. Soon, the conversation slowed down. Wilbur readjusted himself against his pillow, and Tommy's head soon fell onto his shoulder. They murmured a few more jokes to each other as Tommy dozed, and it wasn't long before Tommy was snoring against his side. Once again, Wilbur was struck with just how young Tommy looked when he was asleep. How this was an 18-year-old who had been put in more impossible positions than people twice his age had. Instead of waking Tommy up so he could go back to his own room, Wilbur decided to deal with the headache and kept the blindfold on as he slumped further back against his pillows, careful not to jostle Tommy too much. "Good night, Tommy," he whispered, although he knew Tommy wouldn't hear him. When morning came, the Pythia would open his eyes, and the bird would resume its pecking and shrieking to make itself known. But for now, the bird was content. It crooned as it settled in for the night, with Wilbur doing the same. Wilbur let his eyes flutter shut and fell asleep to a bird song only he could hear. Oh, that was such a good chapter. Oh, I love that chapter so much. Sorry, that's me stretching. Oh, lordy. This was a shorter chapter compared to, like, the rest of the chapters in this story. The only reason why this stream has been 1 hour and 30 minutes, roughly, is because of the fact that it took me 30 minutes to get to the fucking chapter. / LH, of course. Alright. I think that's gonna be my stream. Which one is it? This one. There we go. I don't know how long it's gonna take for this stream to be put on the VODs channel, because I've only gotten up to July, I think. Yeah, I've only gotten up to July of 2021 in terms of uploading the VODs. And I started streaming November 2020. And this process has been a thing for a few weeks now. Alright. I think I just saw... a notification. I think I know who we're going to raid. Let's raid Crumb. It's doing art. I love Crumb's art streams. They're so cozy. I love them. All right. Next stream, don't know when, what. I don't know when, where, or what it's going to be, but it'll be soon, I hope, because I'm gonna be really busy during college, and I don't know how much time I'll have to stream, especially with a job. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Bye-bye!